Okay, finding common percentages. Let's take a look at what it looks like to find 10% of 250 and to make a 250% increase. Or should I say a 10% increase? 10% increase. So first of all, we'll start with the original number, which is 250. This represents 100%. To represent 10%, we move the decimal back one time when we lose a zero, or divide by 10, and this becomes 25. Okay, so we're going to take the original 150 and the 25, we're going to add them together. We're going to get 225. This is what we get when we make a 10% increase on 250. Or should I say this represents 110%. Okay, let's find 5% or make a 5% increase in 250. First, 250 represents 100%. We're going to refer back to our 10% answer. Since 10 5% will be half of 25. The way that I take half of 25 is I take half of 24, which is 12, and then half of 1 is 0.5. Now, we're going to add these two. And again, this represents 5%. I'm going to add the decimal here. So we can add these two here. 5 and 0 makes 5. Decimal here. 2 and 0. 2. 5 and 1. 6. And then 2. If we were referring to this as money, we can add a 100th place here, which is a 0. Same answer, but in money we go to the 100ths. Now for the 20% increase. We start off with the 250, which represents 100%. To find 20%, we go back to our 10%, which is 25, and we multiply this by 2, or double it. If you multiply 25 by 2, you'll get 50. So 50 represents 20%. So to make an increase, we're going to add these two. We get 0, 10, carry out 1, and this is 3. So 300 is 120% of the original 250. So that was a 20% increase. Now, let's make a 15% increase. Again, starting off with our original 250, this represents 100%. That is the original number. To find 15%, we're going to take our 10% and our 5% answers and add these together. So a 25 added to a 12.5 will give us 37.5. And that's what we add this to. 37.5. And that represents 15%. Now we're going to add these together to get our increase. And I'm going to add a decimal 0 here. And so when you add 5 and 0, you get 5. The decimal. 0 and 7, 7. 5 and 3, 8. And adding the 2. And again, to make this resemble or represent money, you can add a 0 here. Okay. Now let's talk about decreases. A 10% decrease on 250. Well, once again, we start off with our original 250, which represents 100% of the amount. 10%, we divide this by 10, or should I say, we move the decimal one time, and it becomes 25. So 25 represents 10%. Now to make a decrease of 10%, we subtract these. And 5, we cannot take 5 from 0, so we borrow here. We make this a 4. And this becomes a 10. 5 from 10 leaves 5. 2 from 4 leaves 2. And then finally 2 here. 225 represents 90%, or should I say a 10% decrease. Okay. Let's go to 5%. 5% decrease, 250. That represents 100% of the original. To find 5%, we go back to the 10% answer. And we say, well, what's half of 25? Well, I'm going to take half of 24, which is 12. And then half of the 1 that I took away from 25 is going to be 0.5. This represents 5%. Now, to subtract, I'm going to add a decimal and a 0, and I'm going to have to borrow. I cannot take 5 from 0, so I need to borrow from here, but there's no numbers here. So I can borrow from the 5 here. When I borrow from the 5, we'll get a 4. And this becomes 10. I borrow from the 10, this becomes 9, and now this becomes 10. So 5 from 10 gives us 5. 2 from 9 gives us 7. And 1 from 4 gives us 3. And bring down to 2. Okay. This represents 95% of the original. And again, we can't add a 0 if we want this to be in terms of money. Okay, a 20% decrease. Well, 250 represents 100% of the original. To find 20%, we go back to our 10%, which is 25, and we double this, or should I say multiply by 2. When you multiply 25 by 2, you get 50. So this will be 50. And get rid of the decrease. 50 represents 20% of the original. Okay. When I subtract these, 250 minus 50, I'm left with 200. And 200 represents 80% of the original, given we made a 20% decrease. Now let's make a 15% decrease. Once again, we start off with the 250. This represents 100%. To find 50%, we're going to put together our 10 and our 5% together, which is the 25 and 12.5. Adding the 25 and the 12 gives us 37. And then we add the 0.5 to the end. And again, this is 15%. All right, we're going to subtract this by adding a decimal and a 0. And subtraction here. I cannot take 5 from 0, so I need to borrow, but there are no numbers here to borrow. So I'm going to borrow from this guy from the 5 and make it a 4. So now this becomes a 10. Now I'm going to borrow from the 10, it becomes a 9, and this becomes a 10. Okay, 5 from 10 gives us 5. 7 from 9 gives us 2. 3 from 4 gives us 1. And there's 2. This represents 85% of the original 250. And if I want this in terms of money, I will add a 0 here. Gets me to the hundredths place.